Welcome back. It is time for record predictions. I was going to do it for the entire league, all 32 teams, but I figured that would take way too long. So we're going to do the NFC today, and I'm going to go for the AFC on Monday or Tuesday. Season starts on Thursday, of course, so right around the corner. Very excited. But anyway, we're going to predict every team in this conference, the playoffs as well. Leave in the comments, who do you think is going to make it out of the NFC this year? Of course, not the best conference, but probably better than the past couple years. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like, and let's get into it. We'll go from East to West. So, I'm starting with the NFC East, and these are my predictions. I have the Eagles in first place at 12-5. Their over-under is 10.5 for the year, so I have them going over. Dallas Cowboys over-under is 9.5. I have them going a bit under that at 8-9, but that's good enough for second place in this division. The Commanders are at 6.5 wins on the year. I gave them 7 to go 7-10. The Giants are at 6.5. I gave them 6 wins to go 6-11. For Philadelphia, I see a bounce back year for them. You think about some of the guys they lost, of course, DeAndre Swift and Kevin Byard. What they gained is a lot better, in my opinion. You get Bryce Huff, of course. You get CJ Gardner-Johnson back. Saquon Barkley from the Giants, of course. And they recently traded for Jahan Dotson. They get Devin White, and they draft Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo in the first round, and that's big for them because the cornerback room's getting a bit up there in age, of course, with Bradbury and Slay. Bradbury's already hurt, I saw. I guess another big topic for this Eagles team is how will they do with Jason Kelce now retired. Of course, Cam Jurgens is a guy they've kind of groomed to be that center of the future, and if that works out, they should be fine, but of course that's a concern, and who's going to call out the protections and things like that. I know last year got away from these guys, and the last 7-8 weeks were awful for Philadelphia, but I just think they're going to bounce back this year. You get a new offensive coordinator, you add a dynamic running back to go along with a dynamic running quarterback. I just think it's going to work out, so, I think they're going to have the best record in this conference, and I see things going much better for Philly in 2024 rather than 2023. Dallas, who I have at 8-9, I mean, you look at their offseason and they did not spend a lot. Their main addition was Eric Kendricks, who is past his prime at this point, to join Mike Zimmer, who's now the defensive coordinator for Dallas. Of course, Dan Quinn, now coaching the Commanders. But they lost Tyrone Smith. They lost Tony Pollard. Dorrance Armstrong also went to the Commanders. So they lost more than they gained, and they finally re-signed CeeDee Lamb, which was the right move. I don't know why it took so long. You do have Dak Prescott in a contract year, so maybe Dak, due to that, will play the best football of his life, but you look at the supporting cast, and it's not the best supporting cast of Dak's career. He's definitely had better. Their offensive line's young. You have, of course, rookie Tyler Guyton at left tackle with Tyrone Smith going to the Jets, and you got to hope that works out. Having Dak at quarterback and calling out protections, it definitely helps, of course. Especially for their running game, I have my concerns. You have Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott at 29 years old as your primary backs. They brought in Dalvin Cook, which I think he's pretty cooked, to put it bluntly. So we'll see how this offense responds with some of these offseason moves and whatnot, but I think Mike McCarthy, it's going to be his last year here. I mean, Jerry Jones had that odd quote about kind of like, I enjoy there being pressure for our head coach or something like that. It was weird. So I think this is going to be McCarthy's last season in Dallas. He's been there since 2020. I was a bit surprised he even hung on for this year, but he earns another year, and we'll see how that goes. But I just don't feel great about this team. I could be wrong, of course, and they do have a lot of cornerback concerns. You have Trayvon Diggs off an ACL tear coming back, and you just lost Ron Bland for 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll see how that goes in the secondary, but I don't love the Cowboys this year as compared to previous seasons. The Commanders I have in third at 7-10, and I somewhat like this team this year. I mean, maybe it's going to be a bit too early to win 7 games. Maybe that's next year, but I could see things going well here. You have a lot of newness, which this team needed with that bad ownership group they had before, and you bring in Adam Peters, who I wanted my Giants to have at GM for their last 2 GM cycles, and it didn't happen, unfortunately, but I do like him a lot coming from San Francisco. You have a lot of San Francisco players and coaches and some Dallas defenders coming over, so they're building like a nice little team over there, and of course they drafted Jaden Daniels second overall in this past draft. And I'll be honest, I did like Drake May more, but I just think maybe that's going to work out better for their offense. They have Cliff Kingsbury at offensive coordinator now. He did not work out as a head coach in Arizona, but I feel like their offenses at times were fine, and he had a similar type of quarterback with Kyler Murray, so I'm pretty sure he knows what to do with Jaden Daniels, hopefully. I mentioned Dan Quinn at head coach. He gets his second shot at this. Of course, he was on the wrong end of 28-3 with the Falcons, and he kind of fizzled out there after a while. The secondary is a little concerning. You have Benjamin St-Juste at cornerback 1. I don't know if he's ready for that. We'll see. Of course, they took Emmanuel Forbes in the first round last year, and that did not go well. I still have flashbacks of A.J. Brown against him last year. It was rough for him. The offensive line has potential to be pretty bad as well, so I would definitely watch out for that, especially with a young quarterback. And I think the main thing is we'll see if passing on Drake May was a mistake. I mean, I thought it was, of course, but we're going to see how that plays out. But this Washington team has a chance to be fun. They brought in some veterans as well. They brought in Bobby Wagner. They brought in Austin Eckler, who I'm not a fan of, but Frankie Louvu as well is a pretty good player at linebacker. So they brought in some guys, and this could be a pretty decent team. I think they're good enough to be third in this NFC East, so I'll give them 7-10. For my New York Giants at 6-11, as I said before, I made a whole season preview about them a couple days ago, and I'm just not a big fan of this quarterback room. You have Daniel Jones, year 6, not looking forward to that, and behind him is Drew Lock, who honestly is a bit of a downgrade from who their backup was last year with Tyrod Taylor. Of course, Tyrod does not stay healthy, but Drew Lock also has the same issue. He's been hurt already in the preseason, so he'll be fine, though, for week 1. They lost a couple of team leaders. They lost McKinney on defense going to the Packers. They lose, of course, Saquon to the Eagles. I think for this Giants team to really win more games than we thought they would, it's pretty simple. The defensive line has to be disruptive and just, as I said in my preview, make opposing quarterbacks' lives hell. And they can do that, of course, having Dexter Lawrence, who might be the best interior defensive lineman in football these days. They get Brian Burns from the Panthers in a trade at 2 and a 5, and of course they signed Burns to a massive contract, but he's put up good numbers in Carolina. And of course, Kayvon Thibodeau in his 3rd year. He had a good year last year. It was just inconsistent, so I'm hoping he can just be a more consistent edge rusher. You have Azeez Ojulari as a rotational edge rusher, so that's good to have. And if they can just disrupt the opposing quarterback enough, maybe it works out for them. If their offense can just be decent, which I just don't see a world where they have a good offense this year. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I just don't see it. I do love Brian Dable. I think we'll get the most out of this team, but another big thing is the offensive line. The offensive line got a new coach, Carmen Bracillo from the Raiders. Hopefully that works out for them. Their offensive line looked better in the preseason when the starters played against Houston, so hopefully that carries over. And the secondary, it did get better because they did just sign Adoree Jackson, which was nice to see. So I like that for depth, but you got to hope Deonte Banks can be a real cornerback 1. You have a rookie safety, Tyler Nubin, who they took in round 2. So if those guys can step up, and we'll see if they do or not, but that would be big for their secondary as well. So I just think their offense does not have any type of ceiling, and I just can't see them being that great. Maybe defensively they'll be a pretty good team, but I just don't see it resulting in many wins. For the NFC North, I'm going to have the Packers in first place, which might be a surprise. I feel like most people will have Detroit, which they might be right, but I just like the Packers. Their win total's 9.5. I have them at 11-6. The Lions, I have at 2nd. They're at 10.5. I put them at 10-7, so slightly under. The Bears at 8.5. I have them at 8-9. And then last, I have the Vikings finishing at 5-12. Their over-under is 7.5. And I kind of feel bad about that because I do like Kevin O'Connell, but I just don't love the quarterback room and some of the guys coming back from injuries and whatnot. Anyway, for Green Bay, we'll start with them. They added Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, who I just mentioned. That was a good addition by them. They didn't lose anybody too bad, I feel like. John Runyon went to the Giants. I mean, that might hurt them a bit, but still, their offensive line should be fine. They caught fire last year, and they finished out the year 6-2, and they went to the playoffs and won a playoff game, and they probably should have beat San Francisco. They do have the youngest roster in the league, so that might be a bad thing in terms of competing now, but it might be a good thing because those guys could get better throughout the year. So if they get hot at the right time again, which they did last year, then maybe it works out perfectly and they ride that momentum to the Super Bowl. Who the hell knows? Jordan Love was playing out of his mind to close out last year. He had an 18-1 touchdown to interception ratio the final 8 games, and they do have a good receiving core. It's kind of funny because they don't have like a wide receiver 1. They obviously don't have Adams anymore, but they do have Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson, Luke Musgrave at tight end. Like, they just have a bunch of guys who are good. Not great, but good. I feel like Watson could break out. It depends if he's healthy and they fixed his hamstring issues. We'll see if that's true or not. But this is also a team that lost to Tommy DeVito last year, so I don't know if I could trust them or not, but based on my rankings here, I'm just going to go out and trust them. So I'll put the Packers in first. They have a good overall roster. I'm hoping Jordan Love can take another step forward. We'll see if he does. So in second place, I have the Lions at 10-7. I do love the fact that 14 of their first 15 games are indoors, and Jared Goff indoors is a better quarterback than he is outdoors. And I feel like that might be the case for most quarterbacks, but for Jared Goff, it's like a big difference. So that's great for them. They did add DJ Reader, Kevin Zeitler, Marcus Davenport, who I always thought was worth taking a shot on. But they did lose Jonah Jackson to the Rams, who's already hurt. They did lose CJ Gardner-Johnson to the Eagles. Can this Lions team be elite for 2 years in a row? I do have my concerns because my entire football fandom life, the Lions have not been that good. So maybe they have fixed things here. We'll see. The receiving core is not that great outside of Amon-Ra. You do have to hope Jameson Williams takes a big step forward. Josh Reynolds now plays in Denver. They did sign Allen Robinson at their practice squad, so maybe he comes back and does something. The offensive line is still tremendous, even though they did lose Jonah Jackson, but of course they got Kevin Zeitler to kind of replace him. I did love the pick of Terrion Arnold in the first round, the cornerback out of Alabama, one of my favorite prospects this year who wasn't like a top 10 pick. The run game should still be great. Montgomery. Gibbs does have the hamstring issue, but he's back practicing and hopefully should be okay. I was a bit turned off in fantasy football because I just don't want to draft a guy with hamstring issues, but for real life, hopefully it works out for them. But this Lions team should still be good. They're still a playoff team in my opinion. Maybe they're better than I expect them to be. It would not shock me if they won 12 games or something like that, but I'm going to have them in second at 10-7. Third place, I have the Bears at 8-9. Of course, I made a video probably a couple months ago about saying, can Caleb Williams be the first rookie quarterback to make and win a Super Bowl? Of course, I don't actually believe that because that'd be insane, but I do think for any first overall pick quarterback, this guy probably has the best surrounding cast I could remember. He's going into a situation of a team that just added Keenan Allen at wide receiver. They drafted Rome Odunze top 10. They signed DeAndre Swift at running back. And their offensive line is like decent. It could be better, obviously, but they have so many great skill position players. Caleb has great pocket awareness for the most part. Sometimes he'll try and do more than he can, and it results in a bad sack or something. He does have the weapons to have a very fun offense here. They brought in a new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, who of course was very good with Seattle in 2022, took a step back in 2023. They did run a slow offense there in Seattle, but I think a lot of that was because their defense could not get off the field. So I do hope it's more of an up-tempo, fun offense. This Bears team closed out 2023 going 5-3. It probably saved Matt Eberflus's job. Of course, they moved on from Justin Fields, which I always thought was the right move. They of course, added wide receiver talent. They brought in Kevin Byard to play safety, and if he doesn't fall off, I think their secondary could be very good. Byard's now 31 years old, but they did re-sign Jalen Johnson, cornerback 1, who I think is one of the better cornerbacks in football now. Their defensive line outside of Montez Sweat, who when they brought him over, he was great, but outside of him, I do have my concerns, so we'll see if the pass rush can get there. I'm just expecting a really fun team here. They may not be great record-wise, but I do think they'll be around 500 from somewhere from 7 to 9 wins, but they're going to be fun while doing it. So I think Bears fans have a lot to look forward to. Like, I do envy your situation. I would love the Giants to be in that situation right now. It seems like Ryan Poles, who may not be perfect, but that trade he made with the Panthers to eventually get the first overall pick was a slam dunk. And Caleb Williams, is going to be a guy who could turn this franchise around. And the Bears, of course, have never had a 4,000-yard passer, which is ridiculous, and I do think he'll break that by his second or third year. Maybe he'll break it his rookie year. We'll see. I'm hoping the Bears do well. Their fan base definitely deserves it, and we'll see if they can try and speed up the process and be great right away in 2024. A team that I don't see being great in 2024 is the Minnesota Vikings, who I have at 5-12. I have them 2.5 wins below their over-under, and I do get it because, as I said earlier, Kevin O'Connell is a really good coach. I respect him as a coach, and he does great work with quarterbacks. This kind of feels like a year in waiting because of the injury to J.J. McCarthy, which really sucks. I was a big J.J. fan. I wanted to see him play this year, and I just, I feel like Sam Darnold may not be as bad as the public thinks he is. This is definitely the best situation of his career. Of course, he played in San Francisco last year, but play is a loose statement. He didn't play much at all. For an opportunity to play, this is definitely the best shot he's ever had. Like, with the Jets, there wasn't a great shot. With the Panthers, there wasn't a great shot. This is a great chance here for Sam Darnold at whatever age he is, 25, 26, to really turn around his career and become a guy who can maybe turn into like a Ryan Fitzpatrick and just be like really good in the second half of his career. So we'll see if he can do that. But once again, I feel bad for J.J. McCarthy. Hopefully he's back and healthy next year. Their defense looked better with Brian Flores. They ranked 14th overall in points allowed, which was definitely a big step up from where they were the prior 2 seasons. Their tackles look good. The interior offensive line, definitely some major questions there. We'll see what happens at the guard spots specifically. And this team's had a very, I would say, tragic and also disappointing offseason. Of course, their 3rd-round pick, Kyrie Jackson, had that tragic death in the car accident. And then you had 2 other members of this team have DUIs. I think that was after that incident happened, which is it's just unbelievable. Between that and what happened to, of course, the hockey players the other day, I mean, just don't drink and drive, people. I don't know who I'm going to reach out to with saying that, but just don't do it. It's not worth it. But anyway, so very disappointing what happened there and tragic as well. But, for Minnesota, from a football standpoint, they have the right head coach. I'm hoping for Sam Darnold he can turn his career around. And I do think Justin Jefferson will have a bounce back massive season. He was great when he played last year, but of course he missed about 6 games with the hamstring. And they should get TJ Hawkinson back at some point, probably around like week 5 or so, hopefully. He's coming off a torn ACL pretty late last year. But overall, I expect to step back. No Kirk Cousins, so I have them at 5-12. For the NFC South, a division that has not been that great for a while now, but first I'm going to have the Falcons at 10-7. A lot of turnover there, and luckily for them, it was good turnover. No more Arthur Smith. Their win total is 9.5, so I have them going over. The Buccaneers were given a 7.5 win total. I have them right under at 7-10. The Saints were at 7.5. I have them at 6-11. And the Panthers at 5.5. I gave them 5 wins. So obviously I'm not too high on this division. I have 3 teams under, 1 team barely over. But we'll start with the Atlanta Falcons, who of course they, as I mentioned, fired Arthur Smith. They picked up Raheem Morris, and now Zach Robinson's the offensive coordinator from the Los Angeles Rams. They added pieces offensively, mainly, of course, Kirk Cousins at quarterback, who was really good the past couple years. Of course, he tore his Achilles in the middle of last year, but he's back and healthy now. Hopefully, he does stay healthy. He's been healthy throughout the rest of his career, just that one bad luck injury, so hopefully he's fine. They also added Darnell Mooney at wide receiver 2. That could be a good move opposite of Drake London, who I like a lot this year. Still have Kyle Pitts as well. Bijan Robinson entering year 2. I'm expecting big things. Took him in my draft last night, so hopefully Bijan does have a great season. On defense, they also got a lot better. They did add some guys who may be a little past their prime, but still hopefully elite players. Matthew Judon, who was great in 21 and 22, got hurt last year. And then, of course, Justin Simmons from the Denver Broncos, the safety. He was an All-Pro last year. Took a while to get signed. I guess he didn't get the money he thought he would get. He's now north of 30, but still plays at a very high level. And the other safety is Jesse Bates. So that safety tandem is just dangerous over there in Atlanta. Could be great. The offensive line still looks very good. It's been good for a couple years now. They have weapons everywhere. Their defense, like aside from their cornerback 2 spot and their linebacker position, I really don't see many weaknesses on this team. So if you're going to get the Kirk Cousins we saw before he got hurt last year, this team has a chance to win 10, 11 games and maybe win a playoff game. I mean, I don't trust playoff Kirk Cousins to go very far in the playoffs, but they do have a really good roster, upgrades at coaching, and they could be really good this year. So I'm definitely in on the Falcons in 2024. The Buccaneers, who I have at 7-10, I just expect regression is the biggest thing. If I could describe this team in one word, it's regression. So, of course, they lost Dave Canales, who's now coaching the Panthers. He's done a great job with quarterbacks from Geno to Baker Mayfield last year. And this team did lose Shaquille Barrett, who I think is now retired. He went to the Dolphins, but I'm pretty sure retired, wants to be with his family. But he's still a pretty big loss, I would say. Carlton Davis at cornerback and Devin White at linebacker. They did bring in Bryce Hall from the Jets. They did bring in Jordan Whitehead as well. And as a guy who really likes Baker Mayfield, I've been a fan of his since Oklahoma. I just don't see him being as great as he was last year. I do hope I'm wrong and I'm going to be rooting for them, but I just think some offensive regression is going to happen for them for sure. They did kind of boost their offense. They brought in Graham Barton at center, who they drafted in the first round. They brought in Jalen McMillan at wide receiver. So those guys can help boost their offense a bit. They need to be better at running the ball. They did draft Bucky Irving, but Rachaad White has been an inefficient runner for the past couple years, or the first 2 years of his career, so that has to be better. They still have some stud names on defense: Levante David, Jamel Dean, Vita Vea. Antoine Winfield Jr. got the big extension. So I do like where they're at defensively for the most part. They do have some weaknesses, but still a lot of elite players, as I just mentioned. Their run game, as I said, it's my biggest concern probably, along with losing Dave Canales, but they do have like Ben Bredeson starting at guard. So as a Giants fan, I know he's not awful, but you could do better. So I have my concerns there as well. Of course, Tristan Wirfs went to left tackle last year. He was still phenomenal, so that's great. So once again, I hope they're good, but I just think they'll take a bit of a step back this year, so I have them at 7-10. The Saints at 6-11. Definitely not a fan of them this year. I feel like Dennis Allen might be the first head coach fired. I think the odds actually have him as the first head coach fired, so it would not be shocking at all. Derek Carr still here. I feel like Saints fans already are not a big fan of Derek Carr, and I get it. Ryan Ramczyk out for the year. That sucks. That knee injury is pretty bad, I guess, so he was ruled out pretty early in the offseason. They did draft Talis Fuaga to play left tackle. I liked him a lot. Hopefully that pick works out for them. They don't have the best skill position players, but they're decent. You do have Taysom Hill in a different role this year, apparently, so we're going to see what happens there. Can Chris Olave in year 3 have that big breakout? Rashid Shaheed downfield, can he be consistent? You have Kamara, who's now 28, 29. He's getting up there, but still looks all right. He did have a bit of a back injury in the preseason, so hopefully he's fine. But I just don't love the offense. Of course, Derek Carr being there. They did bring in a new offensive coordinator. Clint Kubiak probably runs the same stuff as his dad did and could have that outside zone running scheme and give the wide receiver one more short passes. So I'm expecting Olave to have a better year, and maybe the run game's a bit better. For defense, they still have good players on defense. They have Lattimore still. Adebo had a good year at cornerback. Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan's now 35, so he's getting up there, but still playing pretty well. Tyrone Matthew is also north of 30, but he still plays well. Once again, I just don't love this team. I just feel like they're kind of boring, and I'm just expecting a 6-7 win type of year, maybe 8. But I think 6 wins is possible with their type of situation. I don't love Dennis Allen once again, so 6-11 for me for the Saints. And lastly, the Carolina Panthers at 5-12. Of course, they were the worst team in football last year. Adding Dave Canales, he might be a bit young for this job. He at least looks very young. He's 43. I thought he was like 35. All right, so maybe I'm wrong about that. But Dave Canales, first-time head coach. Can he save Bryce Young's career? Obviously, I mentioned before, Geno Smith, he helped him pretty much get his career back on track. Baker Mayfield, same thing last year. Can he do it for Bryce Young? We'll see. They added Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette in the draft, so they added some offensive talent. Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas, coming off IR at some point this year, probably around week 4, week 5 as well. You do have Clowney, who they signed, Derek Brown still on the defensive line, J.C. Horn hopefully stays healthy, Xavier Woods at safety. They have some players here, but overall it's not that great of a roster. And if Bryce Young does not take the leap they expect, it's going to be another failed quarterback in Carolina. So it's going to be disappointing. I'm hoping that Bryce Young can figure it out this year and that Canales is the answer for them, but I'm just not expecting that many wins. NFC West, to round it out, I have the San Francisco 49ers in first at 11-6. Their over-under is 11.5. I just think they might take a bit of a step back. A lot of stuff went wrong. I'll get into them. The Seahawks at 9-8. Their win total is 7.5. I'm definitely higher on them than the public, I feel like. The Rams I have at 8-9. Their win total is 8.5. And the Cardinals at 6-11. They have a 7.5 win total. So we'll start with San Francisco. I guess Brock Purdy's kind of good. I guess I was wrong about that, so I will eat crow about that one. I still am not convinced he's a top 10 quarterback, but he does what they need him to do. They did sign Josh Dobbs at backup quarterback in case he gets hurt or something. Offensive injuries and guys holding out has been a big story so far. Brandon Ayuk finally got signed. McCaffrey has the calf strain. Trent Williams holding out. And I feel like Trent Williams is the type of guy who will miss games. So, I mean, they're going to have to give him the money to show up, I feel like. And their offensive line, aside from Trent Williams, is no one's that great. Like, you have Aaron Banks still trying to break out, and you have McKivitz at right tackle. Like, you don't have anyone spectacular. So I think Trent Williams is very important to get back for that team. I know he's a bit up there in age, but this is still the anchor of your offensive line, playing the most important position on the offensive line. Their defense still has a lot of elite players, maybe not as much depth as it used to have. Dre Greenlaw coming off the injury, of course, so we'll see when he gets back. But it's still, like, you have Warner, you have Ward at corner, you have Bosa, of course. They signed Leonard Floyd. They added Malik Collins as well. They still have Javon Hargrave. Like, they have good names on this team, so they'll be fine defensively, I believe. And then offensively, of course, you still have the great weapons. I am concerned that Ayuk signed a bit late. Does that result in a hamstring or something popping up? We'll see. George Kittle, of course, still there. Debo. So yeah, they have the same squad for the most part, and they should be good. I just think they might take a bit of a step back. Next, I have Seattle, the Seahawks, who once again I have at 9-8. I think they're going to surprise people this year in a good way. They added Mike McDonald as their head coach. I did like that a lot. He did a great job in Baltimore, and it could be a big loss for them. We'll get to the AFC video, of course, as I mentioned. So the quarterback room is okay. You have Geno Smith still, who took a bit of a step back from 22, but he was still fine. I think he'll get better this year, and you have Sam Howell behind him in case he gets hurt or something like that. Ryan Grubb brought in an offensive coordinator for Shane Waldron, who I mentioned went to the Bears. Of course, Grubb coming from college from Washington, he had the really good offense with Michael Penix. Hopefully that works out for them. They have 3 really good receivers here in Seattle, just like Washington, so hopefully that transition works out well for them. Their defense looks really good. I don't love that they lost to Uchenna Nwosu for the first 2 to 6 weeks, so that sucks. Aside from that, their defense still looks great. Byron Murphy in the draft fell in their lap. That was great value. I was a big fan of him. And even guys like Ken Walker. I think Ken Walker is going to have like a breakout year. I like him a lot this year. And Noah Fant, they can maybe finally unlock him or unleash him with a new offensive coordinator. The offensive line is solid. You just have to hope that Charles Cross keeps improving. He was their first round pick in 2022. And if he does, then I have a good feeling about this team. So yeah, defensively, love him. Offensively, there are more questions, but between like JSN and Ken Walker and Noah Fant, you have a lot of guys that can break out. Metcalf might have his best year since 2020. So I feel good about this team. I really do. So I think they'll finish above the Rams, and I have them in second place. Third place, I have the Rams at 8-9. And yeah, if they stay healthy and Stafford stays healthy, I'm going to be wrong about this. I will come out and say it. I just don't think he will stay healthy, and I feel bad saying that because I've always been a Stafford fan, but he's now 36 and a half years old. So many back injuries in his career. The backup is Jimmy Garoppolo, which he's very injury prone as well. He's also serving a 2-game suspension, but luckily it's the first 2 games, so if Stafford gets hurt, it won't really affect them that much. I do think Garoppolo will step in there and do a decent job, but then you have to wonder, like, how long will Garoppolo last? I don't know. You don't want to go into week 12 and Stetson Bennett's your starting quarterback. That would be a damn shame. I just feel like last year was pretty much a 95th percentile best outcome for the Rams. I was really hoping they would beat the Lions. They almost did. I thought they should have, honestly. Jonah Jackson, who they already added at guard, is already hurt. We'll see how long he's hurt for. It doesn't sound great from what's coming out. They added Colby Parkinson at tight end. That might be a decent pickup from Seattle. They added Cameron Curl at safety from Washington. I did like that move as well. But they lost a guy named Aaron Donald. That really sucks. I mean, maybe he pulls a who's a guy who always came back. There's always those guys who retire then come back late in the year for playoff runs. I feel like, did Gronk do that once? I forget now, but you have guys who do that. Maybe Aaron Donald will do that. He still stays in shape, obviously, so maybe. However, they did add Jared Verse in the first round and Braden Fisk in the second round, so that's going to help their defensive line. They got good value on those guys because so many players went in the first round on offense, like the first 14 picks were offensive players or something, so great value there their cornerbacks are a bit older. Tre'Davious White is slated to be a starting cornerback, and he has not been himself in a couple years now. He's now, I think, 29 years old, so that's a concern. The weapons look great. Kyron Williams, the punt returner, apparently. You have Blake Corum, who I love for fantasy football this year. Demarcus Robinson, your wide receiver 3. Of course, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who Nacua's injury is a bit shady because they said, like, oh, he'll be fine for week 1, no doubt. Now reports are coming out that it may not, the recovery's not going as smooth as they thought it would. I'm assuming he'll play week 1 still based on what they're saying, but it's like you wish that the news was better during the recovery. So Puka and Kupp, I think Kupp has a nice bounce back year this year. They should be fine. I really do think if Stafford's healthy, they'll be fine, but I just know that this is real life and injuries happen, and I think a lot of things went right for them last year, so I think they'll see more injuries this year. How do they face adversity? They have a great head coach, obviously. I have no concerns about that, but I do think, however, they will take a bit of a step back. Then lastly, the Arizona Cardinals, who are kind of in a weird situation because I'm thinking about it. Like, Kyler Murray, is he their quarterback of the future? I guess he is because of the contract, but it's kind of a weird situation. He came back from the ACL last year. He played okay. He was fine. For a guy coming off an ACL, I was pretty surprised. So you have Kyler still there, and maybe he's the long-term guy, but you're also at the same time moving in this new direction. You have Jonathan Gannon at head coach in year 2. You drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. 4th overall. Trey McBride, of course. Like, they have an offense that could be really fun. Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson, James Conner. They drafted Trey Benson to back him up. I like their offense. I think they have a chance to be really fun. But their defense is what is really concerning and why this team is probably a 6 to 8 win team. Sean Murphy Bunting is the cornerback 1, so that is not what you want to see. I was always a fan of Marco Wilson. I saw they got rid of him, but I always thought he'd be something out of Florida. I guess I was wrong about that. The defense, as I said, it's not what you want. I think there are concerns there. Can Jonathan Gannon get the best out of them? It's definitely possible. I think there's a chance they could outproduce their win total if the offense is like actually elite, not just really fun and really good. If they're like an elite offense, which maybe they can be, then it's possible they get 8-9 wins and flirt with the wild card. But if not, it's probably a team that is 6, 7, 8 wins or so. So I'll go with 6 wins for the Cardinals. For the playoffs, this is how it shakes out based on what I predicted. So first round, it's going to be the Eagles with a bye, so we won't see them until round 2. But the first round will give us the Atlanta Falcons hosting the Detroit Lions. I actually picked Atlanta to win that game. I don't know why I did. I feel like if Atlanta's as good as I think they'll be, these are pretty even teams. And of course, I could be wrong about that, especially if Kirk Cousins does not bounce back from the injury. But I feel like there's a chance that maybe Atlanta is just as good as Detroit, and they would be the home team, so I'll take Atlanta there. I know Kirk Cousins in the playoffs. It's not what you want to bet on, but oh well. The Packers would be hosting the Seahawks, 6 versus 3. I would have the Seahawks winning that game. It's not that I hate the Packers. It's like I just love the Seattle team, so I think Seattle can go in there and win that game. It would not surprise me with that defense they have. The 7 versus 2 would be pretty fun, actually. The Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. There were a few teams tied with 8 wins. I just feel better about the Rams as compared to the Cowboys and the Bears, so I picked the Rams to make it via the tiebreaker. But anyway, San Francisco, I have them winning that matchup. It might be close. They've had close matchups in the past, of course, but San Fran for me. Then it would be the Eagles hosting the Seahawks. Philly coming off that bye. I think Philly would win this game. I just cannot see Geno or Sam Howell going into Philly and winning that game, unfortunately. The Niners would be hosting the Falcons. I also cannot see Kirk Cousins going into San Francisco and winning a game there. We saw Kirk try to do that in 2019, I believe, with Minnesota. It did not go well. I know that was 5 years ago and a different team, but still. Then we have a pretty chalky matchup here, so my apologies, but Philly hosting San Francisco, a rematch of 2022's NFC Championship game. I'm going to have Philly winning this game and going to the Super Bowl. I think this is a year for Philly to get it right. They, of course, were so bad at the end of last year, but I feel like the vibes are better. They did make enough offseason improvements to have a very elite offense for the entire year, and I still like their defense a lot too. The corners are a bit older, of course, but as I mentioned, if Quinyon Mitchell is who I think he will be, they should be fine. So give me Philly to come out of the NFC. And as I said, on Monday, hopefully, or Tuesday, the latest, we'll have the AFC record predictions video. Stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this one, of course, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys next time.